Protesters invade the classroom of a UC Berkeley professor, and it's all caught on tape.
And there's a big mess in Oakland, but the culprits are not the usual suspects.
These stories and more coming up on CNS News. Hello, I'm Nick Goroff.
And I'm Kathy Busowitz. Deciding what news to cover can be pretty subjective. Here at CNS, we tell the stories you might not hear anywhere else.
And we hope you'll enjoy the ride. Speaking of rides, Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, has long been a source of frustration for people who want to get across the Bay after midnight. Starting this week, there's a new option that may help transit riders who aren't living 9 to 5.
If you've ever wondered where the toll you pay to drive across the bridge goes, there's some good news. As of December 9th, that extra $1 they've been charging in 2005 will be used to jumpstart an all-night bus service that runs the same routes as BART.
When people hear about it, their eyes light up that this could happen.
Stuart Cohen's coalition says that late-night transit consumers want a better way to get across the Bay. We went to catch the last BART train just after midnight to see what riders have to say for themselves.
But I have had evenings where I've left concerts at the Coliseum before the concert was over because I had to make a train.
You can only go around this time. Like right now, I'm going to go back home.
I mean, all the bars close at 2. It should at least run after that point.
But it's not just bar hoppers who need to take BART after last call. Some tired workers are affected too.
We get off from work like 12 and something. But sometimes we get off at 1 or more than 1. So there is no way to get home.
BART officials say that even if they wanted to provide that way home, its single-track system isn't designed to run around the clock. That's why Cohen's group proposed the all-nighter. They say the new service will make money for BART and save money for consumers.
The price of a taxi is $55 or so to UC Berkeley, and so to pay what'll be $3 is an incredible deal.
Initial bus service will be limited, so if you miss the last train, make sure you have another way to get home.
Hundreds of people evacuated to the Bay Area after Hurricane Katrina, and they may soon be without a place to live again. Local organizations are struggling to avoid putting them back out on the streets.
The office is gone.
When Angie Downs and her daughter Chloe returned to their Mississippi home after Katrina hit, they couldn't believe what they saw.
We're looking for Angie's apartment.
They relocated to the Bay Area, and home became a hotel room.
I mean, Mississippi was practically gone.
When you've slept 6 nights and 6 days in the Superdome, then you go to Dallas and get evicted on the streets. Finally having a place is great.
About 200 families remain in hotel rooms paid for by FEMA. But on December 15th, that funding will be cut.
We living from hour to hour, not day to day.
I can't even explain the feeling, not knowing what's going to happen, you know.
Local organizations are scrambling to find housing for evacuees.
For us, the hurricane happened in August, but for them, the hurricane is still happening because their life is still in a complete uproar.
Part of the problem is that people from the local FEMA office are still on the Gulf Coast.
All right, Jeff.
We have to get on the phone just like anyone else, any other person. So we call the 800 number and we sit and wait.
Angie and Chloe found a landlord through Craigslist who was willing to give them a break.
I've done a lot of footwork and I've been on the internet like constantly.
Others fear their future.
If they don't come up with nothing, we're going to be out on the streets.
FEMA would not comment on camera. In Berkeley, this is Charlotte Buchan for CNS News.
After Katrina, UC Berkeley took in 77 students from the disaster area.
Now their Gulf Coast universities say they're ready for students to return, but our reporter Marcus Wilson says some are fighting to stay.
Christina Brown was just starting her junior year at Xavier University when Hurricane Katrina hit. The pre-med student found refuge at UC Berkeley, along with dozens of other students from New Orleans. Some of them are not ready to leave.
I want to stay here at least for the semester. Financially, mentally, everything, it's just not feasible to go back.
But now the school that took her in is saying she cannot stay.
We brought them here as visitors, and they knew that when they came, and that was part of the offer, that we were here for you until your schools were ready to take you back.
Dr. Chris Brady visited Berkeley from Tulane in November.
Lots of reconstruction going on. But,
he told students and their parents that New Orleans is ready for their return.
The students have to make up their own minds. We're not going to force anybody to do anything. Tulane, I think, we're going to be really probably better than we were before.
Brady said Tulane is planning some unusual living arrangements for its off-campus students.
We will have cruise ships. For those of you who...
Not everyone was reassured.
I really don't want to live in a Carnival ocean liner, sitting out in the bay, rocking up and down.
In their fight to stay at Berkeley, some displaced students have started a petition drive. Their supporters here say the issue is bigger than just the hurricane.
If the chancellor is true to his word, that he is concerned about improving the representation of black students here at UC Berkeley, and we have students here from historically black colleges and universities, like Xavier, for instance, who want to stay, then the last thing that the university should do is kick them out in December.
Berkeley says it has an obligation to the schools of New Orleans, especially historically black colleges like Xavier and Dillard, to send their students back.
Do we want to have that on our backs, that we contributed to the demise of two of the most prominent historically black colleges in this country?
Lost in the debate, says Christina Brown, is the lingering trauma of Katrina.
I feel like a commodity, and I'm not. I'm a person. And somebody needs to think about what I'm going through personally.
With the semester ending, Berkeley seems unlikely to budge, leaving displaced students with some tough decisions to make about the future. In Berkeley, I'm Marcus Wolson.
To many people, UC Berkeley is synonymous with free speech, but that may depend on your politics. Conservative law professor John Yoo is a target after writing a memo to the Bush administration justifying torture. Joshua Fisher has the story.
Help me! Somebody help me!
On October 26th, angry protesters entered a crowded constitutional law class at UC Berkeley's Bolt Hall. The professor was John Yoo. In 2002, he wrote the now infamous memos that some say provided the Bush administration with a legal justification for torture.
We had to think through how the sets of rules that have been developed for sort of big mechanized warfare between nation states had to be adapted and changed.
Yoo declined to comment for this piece, preferring to focus on his role as a teacher rather than his status as a political target.
He should be in jail. He shouldn't be teaching a class.
Devin Hogan is a 22-year-old activist with World Can't Wait, a campaign to drive President Bush out of office. She provided this video of the protest and defended her group's unorthodox tactics.
You know, some people had questions about our methods, and they said, you know, it's hurting your cause, but you know, we said that it's really necessary for people to, you know, break out of this silence and this paralysis.
Armin Adjimian is a 24-year-old law student. He disagrees with Yoo's politics, but says he should be allowed to teach at Berkeley.
You got a professor that rationalizes war.
Suppressing one kind of speech for another is not something that's American. And if you want to argue that torture is not American, I'm all ears and I will support you to death.
What are you doing to stop torture? It's happening, it's real, and we're trying to confront it, and we kept saying that, you know, this is real. You know, would you just walk away if, you know, this was an actual torture victim?
Despite the history of campus activism at Berkeley, many students feel that protests do not belong in the classroom. Deborah Barron is one.
I think it's unfortunate that there aren't more forums for people to have kind of more civil dialogue, because they weren't there to have a conversation, they were there to try to frighten him.
At UC Berkeley, this is Joshua Fisher for CNS News.
Protesters say they'll be returning to Yoo's classroom, and we'll be right back after a short break.
November was a busy month for California's labor movement. Here's a wrap of some of their activity.
1, 2, 3, 4, stretch up your
Students are really upset when they learn that their collegiate apparel is still produced in sweatshops. You want to buy a Cal shirt and wear it with pride, but we can't.
Yes, not all the time.
For 9 weeks this fall, Sutter Hospital employees also took to the streets, this time to protest understaffing and poor wages. Outside the hospital, they staged a demonstration, and even Jesse Jackson rallied on their behalf.
Better patient care now.
In November, they finally won concessions from the hospital and went back to work. The hospital says the strike was a power grab by the union, but the union president says the battle's not over.
Next, we go to 8 other Sutter hospitals where our contracts expired, and we see what those CEOs want to do.
In Sonoma County, the agricultural landscape has been changing for a while, but a few farmers like things the way they are. Samantha Grant reports.
Randy Roberts is a 4th-generation apple farmer in Sonoma County. But now, Randy and his father Lloyd are facing reality. An apple farm in Sonoma may not make sense anymore.
It's a funny joke that a lot of farmers tell, that if you won $10 million in the lottery, what would you do? Well, you'd keep farming until it's all gone. So it's kind of there's something to that.
10 years ago, there were over 300 different apple farmers in Sonoma. Today, there are fewer than 30. Lisa Correa is the agricultural commissioner here.
I'd say probably 20, 30, 40 years ago, people probably came to visit Sonoma County, and it was about the apples, and there's still those apples are still available. But I'd say most of our travelers, if you took a poll of our tourists, they are not here looking for apples, but rather to find wines of the county.
With this year's grape harvest being called the 2nd largest ever, it's no wonder that Sonoma is now known as wine country rather than apple country. Randy's neighbor Stan Devoto is tempted by the high price grapes can bring at the market.
If you hand pick your juice apples, we're getting about $170 a ton. A ton of Pinot Noir will fetch anywhere from $2,500 to $3,500 a ton.
But local environmentalist Lynn Hamilton warns that trading apples for grapes is like panning for fool's gold.
Keep those Gravenstein apples on the property and not take them down, not to be tricked into thinking you're going to get a whole bunch of money for the grapes, because eventually there's going to be a glut and you're not.
Nick Fry, president of the Sonoma County Grape Growers Association, has a different suggestion.
If you can't make it in apples, you're probably, your next best option is grapes. And if it isn't grapes, then it's probably to get out of agriculture.
It's enough to make anyone think twice.
I guess we probably should have gone to grapes with everybody else, but it wasn't.
Didn't want to.
Didn't want to.
Plain didn't want to, and just stubbornness, and it's.
You got to be a little stubborn and want hard work and quite a bit stupid. But it's a way of life.
Yeah.
A way of life that is slowly disappearing. For CNS News, this is Samantha Grant in Sebastopol.
In Richmond, another community is reluctant to change. Developers hope to build along a stretch of shoreline, but the local parks district has other ideas. Jordan Debris takes us to the waterfront.
Tucked between Point Pinole and a bevy of old industrial sites, Parchester Village has been home for Whitney Dotsons since the age of 5.
And we would try and catch little small fish in the channels near the railroad track.
Parchester's charm is due in large part to nearly 200 acres of undeveloped coastland bordering the neighborhood. Locals call it Bruner Marsh. Today, a developer is planning to build over 1,000 homes on Bruner Marsh. Brian Grunwald is the group's spokesperson.
It's the only property on the North Shoreline that doesn't have power lines right on its shorelines, or a dump, or a sewage treatment plant.
Grunwald says the planned development reflects much of the best thinking about healthy urban neighborhoods.
And we're proposing a transit-oriented community and a new urbanist community, a walkable community.
What the developer wants to do is just basically wipe out pretty much everything that you can see right here.
But plans for 1,000 houses on the site could be nixed if the East Bay Regional Parks District moves forward with a plan to seize the land.
The park district will pay $5 million and they've offered that. The owner would like to get 50 million.
Some observers believe that Davis & Associates has no actual intention of developing the land. After all, local activists have successfully fought off similar efforts for years. So why draw up plans for 1,000 homes? City Councilman Tom Butts says that a piece of land with 1,000 planned homes on it is going to be much more expensive to purchase than a piece of land with none.
He's trying to add value to the land, and I guess you can't blame him for that.
We're not trying to bilk a public agency.
Today, the Parks District and the developer are negotiating in hopes of avoiding a costly legal battle. For CNS News in Richmond, this is Jordan Debris.
The Parks District will decide whether to buy the land on January 2nd.
Hordes of geese invade Oakland's Lake Merritt Park each year and leave behind a major mess. Tony Daslan shows us how the city is working to tackle the gaggle.
The hundreds of Canada geese that flock around Lake Merritt are a familiar sight for Oakland residents.
We just live near here, so we just come over on a Saturday or whenever we have the time, whenever we have the bread.
But what goes in must come out, and the mess makes it hard for people to enjoy the park.
Well, I always bring a lot of wipes so I can wipe them down, you know, after they do stuff, because they like to be where the birds are. They like to, and there's goose poop all over all of the lawn and grass areas. So, I don't know, it's difficult to avoid.
Lake Merritt is the oldest wildlife refuge in the country. About 200 geese live here. But in the summer, the population swells to about 2,000, each one leaving an estimated pound of waste per day. Parents and joggers are fed up, and now they have the city to support them. City Council member Pat Kernigan.
Wet is just covering the grass, and it makes it pretty much impossible to have picnics or use a lawn area in a park for any of the human uses that people would like to do.
She has a plan to reduce the goose population. The city is considering options like building a fence or having a trained dog herd the geese.
Another possibility to reduce the population, and this one would probably be somewhat controversial, is what they call addling the eggs.
That means shaking or puncturing the eggs so they never hatch. Stephanie Benavides runs the refuge here. She says that Oakland should clean up the mess rather than get rid of the geese.
There are some innovative ideas back east. There is the poop patrol where teens come out, and that's their job. We might need a new street sweeper. They have those things that are downtown near the plaza.
Benavides says that Lake Merritt was originally only a bird refuge and was not meant to be a park for people.
We're in the city, and though the refuge was always wild, a city grew up around it.
She says the easiest solution is to simply stop feeding the birds, because as long as there's plenty of free food, they have no reason to leave. For CNS News, this is Tony Daslan.
In case you're wondering, there's no evidence these geese carry avian flu.
Across the bay, some other things with wings are leaving a much sweeter mark. Singley Agnew tells the story.
Tucked away behind the busy streets of San Francisco, several dozen devoted beekeepers are tending to an invisible industry. In fact, there are more than 1 million kept honeybees in the city.
These hives made over 400 pounds of honey this year, and they didn't go anywhere beyond the borders of San Francisco.
Some even say San Francisco is the world's best honey location because it is a patchwork of microclimates.
7 by 7 miles is a very small area, and yet in each of those neighborhoods I can have a completely different tasting honey, and that doesn't happen anywhere else in the world that I know of.
Robert McKimmey has 40 hives spread throughout the city and labels his honey by neighborhood.
Cow Hollow is very light and candy-like. Pacific Heights is kind of very mellow and light and rich tasting.
All you need to set up a hive is several $100s and a little space that gets a blast of sun and not much wind.
It smells good.
Philip Gary is president of the city's Beekeeper Association.
There's something that's very satisfying of pulling the frames out. I mean, that's the beekeeping part. This is nice.
Spend time with the beekeepers and their passion becomes quickly evident. David Dennebeim is one of the obsessed. He once set up a hive in his living room, opened the windows, and let the bees roam.
And they fly out to the gardens on Russian Hill, gathering pollen and nectar, and they're just as happy as can be. And every day I came home from work, I'd put a little music on my radio, I'd open a beer, I'd sit on my couch, and I'd watch my bees flying in and out of the hive. I mean, this is perfect beekeeping.
But Robert McKimmey says the real pleasure is producing your own food.
It's a rebel act in a way because food is so disconnected from most people's lives.
The San Francisco Beekeepers Association meets monthly to swap tips and share honey. They hope to bring more urban beekeepers into the hive. For CNS News, this is Singly Agnew in San Francisco.
And that's all the buzz from San Francisco.
And here are some other stories you may have missed this fall.
When drivers faced soaring gas prices this fall, some around the Bay Area found a creative, though smelly, way to cut costs. Sasha Woodruff takes us to the pump.
It wasn't long after Katrina that business boomed at the biodiesel oasis.
The phone was ringing off the hook.
Biodiesel users say the fuel, derived from corn or soy oil, and even frying grease, is cleaner, gets better mileage, and doesn't hurt the environment as much as fossil fuels.
The folks here were interested in supporting biodiesel that's primarily made from used vegetable oil, and to me we're killing a number of birds with one stone.
And my solution, unfortunately, is much less pleasant.
An environmental engineering professor at UC Berkeley says the biofuel movement is naive. It takes water, fertilizers, and energy to grow the crops that make biodiesel. That's impossible, he says, on a large scale.
When you try to power 100 million cars using a biofuel, you're doing a wonderful disservice to the society.
Eco-conscious drivers understand their allegiance to biodiesel won't solve the country's energy problems.
I can't honestly say I'm convinced it's the long-term answer for all of our fuel needs.
Not only that, critics say that the easy availability of biofuels could make drivers complacent about energy consumption.
It's very easy for these otherwise very good people to fall into a trap and to explain to themselves that now they don't have to do anything because they have this biofuel.
Oasis co-owner Zimmerman agrees that the ultimate solution is a long way down the road.
There's just no way that biodiesel can keep up with our demand.
Nobody reacts by watching a falling brick until the brick is on your head. And the brick has been falling for quite a while now.
Gas prices have fallen since Katrina, but experts say that won't last. For CNS News, this is Sasha Woodruff reporting.
Most people couldn't imagine a day without cell phones, iPods, and computers. But in one Berkeley shop, they're still celebrating old-fashioned craftsmanship. Pam Harris reports.
This is a sound that's endured into the computer age. At California Office Machines in Berkeley, Herb Permillion and Ken Alexander are in the business of typewriter sales and repair. And even with advances in computer technology, they have no plans to give up typewriters.
Even though they're 50 years old, we can still fix them. We actually have parts for these things. 50-year-old parts, but we do have them for them. So.
True aficionados, Herb and Ken are always on the lookout for rare treasures.
They call this little guy the Olivetti Valentine. As you can see from the red color and the overall look of it, was made to give to your lover on Valentine's Day.
The prices range from $25 on up to $350, but not everything is for sale, like this one-of-a-kind Royal.
I understand that the James Bond writer Ian Fleming had one of these. It sold for somewhere around about, I think, $50,000 or something like that.
If I came into the shop, I had to have that machine. Would you sell it to me?
No.
In a virtual world, there's nothing virtual about a typewriter. Many writers still cling to the old machines in a kind of love affair with their unique feel and sound. They are not correctable. There is no cut, no paste, no undo function. While Ken and Herb can fix any machine that comes through their door, neither knows how to type.
I let the operators do the operating and the mechanics do the mechanicking.
Back in the 70s, the local Yellow Pages showed more than 120 listings under typewriters. Today, there are only 8.
Musical ringtones for your cell phone aren't just a novelty, they're the product of a $3 billion industry. Jason Blaylock takes a look at one Bay Area company that's making cell phones sing.
That old familiar telephone ring is pretty much going the way of the rotary dial. Today, when you get an incoming call, you can hear the latest rock song. Or maybe a hit dance track.
Yeah, this is a song Aisha, and like there's this guy, it's like on the internet, this guy dances to it.
Or you can just program any weird sound you want. These ringtones may sound like an amusing inside joke, but at a few dollars a pop, they're raking in new profits for the music industry.
It's a huge market. I've heard people say that it's about 10% of the music market worldwide, so it's pretty big.
Jeremy Xavier has the unlikely job of choosing what song will become the next ringtone. He works at Maserati in this downtown San Francisco warehouse. Competing with ringtone makers from New York to Japan, it's not as easy as it sounds.
Oh, it's incredibly stressful. If it's a popular song and there's a version already out, we've kind of already missed the boat and blown it.
To stay competitive, Maserati has put together the Olympic team of ringtone artists. Adam Zabarski holds a degree in music composition. And Mike Curtis spent years learning the art of ringtone making in the ringtone mecca of the world, Japan. Mike's former Japanese employer recently came to San Francisco on business, and we got his opinion on a few of Maserati's tones.
This is Naomichi Kashima. He is Chakumeto Master, which means ringtone master. So, what did he say? He said it's nice, but I have a feeling he's just being nice.
The Japanese ringtone composer has a different style from the American, but the art of ringtones, whether Japanese or American style, is quickly being overtaken by the latest fad, a straight download of the original song, known as the MP3. It's a fad that could mean the end of the line for ringtone artists.
Hello?
Now that these MP3s and all that are hitting, it's like it doesn't really take a real musician to be able to do that. It really just takes a robot. Like I'm sure our kids will laugh at us when we tell them we made Probably Find Ringtones.
It's like, Daddy made Atari games.
Yeah. Ringtones are kitschy, and Atari's bringing back a smaller scaled down version of the 2600, and I'm there. And so, I don't know. I mean, if they do go the way of the Atari, I think that's actually a good thing. I think that'll keep us sort of culturally relevant.
And in the game of cultural relevance, there's one Maserati ring that the MP3 could never replace.
So isn't it funny that we had to compose MIDI to make the phone sound like a phone used to? Isn't that weird? Blows your mind.
In San Francisco, this is Jason Blaylock.
And those are some of our favorite stories from the last 4 months.
We'll be back again in February with a few more stories. Same reporters, different anchors. See you next time.
And happy holidays.